Hi friends, welcome back to Lit by Iris. Today's video is very personal to me. I'm going to talk about my top 10 classic science fiction novels. The books like Time Machine, written 50 to 70 years ago, but never feel outdated. That kind of books makes you believe they are classics for a reason. Some of them absolutely blew my mind when I first read them. Others just firstly showed me what science fiction could do, how it could ask huge questions about humanity or invent a future so weird and specific it feels real, or just make you sit there staring at the wall for 20 minutes after finishing because what did I just read? Honestly, these books shaped my taste in science fiction or any genres of books forever. They either got crazy imaginations, ideas that stick to your ribs, and characters or worlds that feel like unreal yet nostalgic at the same time. So now let's dive into the list of why I love them, why they are special to me, and if they still hold up today. Let's get into it. Well, before that, actually, I have cotton here. So cute. Okay, first on the list, let's just check this off first, not a surprise. 1984 by George Orwell. Most of these books, I have several copies. I just pick one that I think it's more like the vintage editions here. This book just means so much to me. 1984 is a dystopian novel about the future where the government watches everyone all the time and controls everything they do and think. The story follows Winston, who works for the government but starts to question why things are this way. When I first read it, I couldn't put it down, and when I finished, I just started over. For weeks, I'd come back for it every day. There's something about the way George Orwell writes. It's just so heavy but addictive. You feel the weight of that world, the fear of being watched. Winston's story isn't just about a broken society, it's about what happens to a person's mind when there's no hope left. What amazes me is how up to date it still feels. The ideas here: surveillance, manipulated truth, language being twisted into something hollow. They're not just predictions, they are warnings that never really fade. Every time I see something in the news that echoes this book, I think, well, Orwell saw this coming, not in a literal way, but in how power works, how people can be controlled. It's truly unsettling, but that's why it sticks with you. If you haven't read it yet, I can't recommend it enough. And if you love dystopian novels, I've actually made a whole video about my favorite classics in the genre. I'll link it below. Next up is Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. This one's is different. It's not a single story, really. It's more like a collection of moments, these quiet, haunting vignettes about humans trying to colonize Mars. While you're reading it, you clearly see that Mars isn't just a planet here, it's like a mirror. It reflects humanity's best and worst, our loneliness, our curiosity. Bradbury is my favorite author of all time, hands down, and this book is why. His writing feels like poetry, but not in a complicated way. It's very simple, vivid, and so sadly beautiful. Like, there's a story about a family settling on Mars, and their house keeps singing these old songs at night, even though everyone's gone. It's eerie and nostalgic at the same time. That's Bradbury. He doesn't need explosions or aliens to make science fiction feel huge. He does this dust-covered towns, empty cities, and people just missing each other. When I first read this, I was struck by how quiet it was It's not action-packed, it's introspective. You get these glimpses of Martians fading away, humans clinging to Earth memories, and all these small tragedies that adds up to something bigger. I'd read it late at night and it feel like the book was whispering to me. And this book 100% holds up today. The themes like colonization, loneliness, destroying what we don't understand are timeless. And Bradbury's prose, it's like a campfire story mixed with lullaby. It doesn't age. If you ever feel like an outsider or wondered what it means to truly explore, this book gets it. It's just so incredibly special. Next, let's talk about Neuromancer by William Gibson. I always wanted to find a better copy, but this is what I got. I also got a green, like a newer hardcover. Isn't my favorite either. I hope one day I can come across something prettier. This book is about the protagonist case. He's a computer hacker. He's offered a chance to pull off a very dangerous hack. This job involves artificial intelligence, powerful corporations, and a whole lot of virtual reality. It's very gritty, fast-paced story set in a dystopian future. Neuromancer got me into cyberpunk. Before reading it, I hadn't really known a world that felt both futuristic and broken down at the same time. It made me want to explore more of the genre, and of all science fiction world build, cyberpunk worlds are some of my favorites. I think Gibson created a fully realized future with its own slang, technology, and social problems. The way he describes cyberspace is still mind-blowing. Even though we now have our own versions of internet, it's a testament to his imagination. Some said it's kind of outdated if read now, while some of the technology might seem a bit outdated. The core themes of Neuromancer, the corporate power, artificial intelligence, and the blurring lines between reality and virtuality are more relevant than ever, I think. This world William Gibson created influenced everything from The Matrix to Blade Runner. One thing though, of all the books I mentioned today, this one isn't an easy read, but it's worth it. Speaking of Blade Runner, this is a book that was really adapted from Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. This book is everything to me. Philip K. Dick is one of those authors who just gets under your skin. His stories are messy, paranoid, and deeply human, and this one is my absolute favorite. It sets in a future where most of Earth is abandoned after a nuclear war. People keep artificial animals as status symbols, and our protagonist Rick track down android. They're almost like humans. But there's a kicker. The story isn't really about hunting androids. It's about empathy, what makes us human. Can a machine feel real pain? And if it does that change how we treat it? I love this book because it's quietly devastating. The movie adaptation, Blade Runner, which I love, has the most beautifully done cinematography. But the book is exactly like walking through a shadowy alley at 3 a.m. alone with your thoughts. I've read it maybe a dozen times, and every time I notice something new. If you've seen Blade Runner, you'll recognize the bones of the story, but the book is weirder and more intimate. It's that kind of story that makes you sit very still afterward, wondering if you'd pass an empathy test. The next book on the list is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. First of all, it has my favorite first line from the book. Well, this version, I got the vintage classic copies, but I just couldn't find it anywhere. This one is a leather bound I found. It's a complete collection of the whole series. Let me read the first line of this book. Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. So beautiful, so heavy. I don't really gravitate toward funny books. Humor is tricky for me, but this one, it's different. It's not just jokes, it's very smart and in an absurd way, which is more important. That kind that makes you smile and stops you cold because you realize how weirdly profound it is. The premise sounds silly. The main character, Arthur, I think, one day he finds out the earth is going to be destroyed. Luckily, his friend Ford, I actually forgot the full name, I think it's Ford, is actually an alien. They hitchhike around the galaxy, getting into all sorts of funny and weird situations. It's a story about space travel, strange creatures, and finding the meaning of life, or at least trying to. I love this book because it feels like nothing else. The humor isn't forced. Douglas Adams writes like he's casually unraveling the universe's secrets while sipping tea. So brilliant. It's not just funny, but kind. Even when it's cynical, there's warmth. The imagination here is crazy. Talking planets, sentiment mattresses, a guidebook that's more relatable than most humans, but it's also deeply human. It pokes fun at how small we are in the cosmos, but never makes you feel helpless, just curious. Talk too much. If you like me and usually avoid funny books, give this book a try. It's not about punchlines, it's about finding something deeper underneath, if that makes sense. Okay, I have to use my Kindle to pretend here. Next we have Roadside Picnic by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. I actually have a very nice copy of this book that I found from a used bookshop that I spent a quite amount of money to get that copy. However, I don't know where I put it now, so I have to use Kindle for now. This book blows me away every time I read it. The premise is years ago, aliens visited Earth. They didn't invade, they didn't communicate, they just stopped by like tourists having a picnic. And when they left, they littered. These abandoned littered zones are full of bizarre, dangerous artifacts, so humans now risk their lives sneaking into these zones to scavenge aliens' leftovers, not even understanding what they are stealing. But here's why it's genius. The aliens on the point, they are never seen, never explained. The stories is about us, how greedy, desperate, and curious, twisted people when faced with unknown. It's not focused on grand scale of space. It's haunting, like standing in a foggy graveyard, feeling like something watching you, but you never see it. But at the same time, you feel like obsessed, wanna know what's going on. This book rewired how I think about aliens. That idea wrecked me. And the characters, they are not heroes. They are just broken people chasing miracles they don't understand. It's such a masterful piece. It's not a happy book, but it's true. The way Strugatsky brother wrote is so atmospheric. They are just master of storytelling. If you ever feel small under a big sky or wonder what's out there, this book will stick with you. It's not an easy read, but it's worth it. Now, the seventh book on the list is The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. This book is about this main character, Jenny I, visited a planet called Ginthen, where everyone is genderless. They are neither male nor female. They shift between both, depending on the time of the month. Jenny's mission is to convince their society to join a galactic alliance, but how do you connect with people whose entire understanding of identity is nothing like yours? I love this book because it doesn't just ask big questions. Le Guin doesn't explain everything. She lets you feel the loneliness of being an outsider, the confusion of misunderstanding someone's culture, and the moments where two people bridge that gap. It's not about aliens or spaceships, it's about what it means to be human when even the ideas of male or female doesn't exist. What makes it special though is how it's written. Ursula Le Guin was a pioneer, not just as a woman in science fiction, but as someone who redefined what science fiction could be. Her world building isn't flashy, and the way she writes about gender ahead of its time. It's not a lecture, it's a mirror. You start seeing your own world just differently. This book holds up well in time. I think the themes about identity, belonging, fear of the other are just timeless, and Le Guin's voice is very calm and wise. It's just such a treat to read. Even when the story is bleak, there's warmth in how she treats her characters. If you ever felt like you don't quite fit in, or wondered how much of who we are is shaped by the boxes society puts you in, this book will stay with you. It's challenging, but in the way a good conversation is. Highly recommend. Next we have Solidus by Stan Starland, about a space station circling a strange planet covered by a giant ocean. The scientists there are trying to figure out the ocean because it seems might be alive, but it starts to mess with their minds by bringing up people and things from their past. It's really about how they handle all these creepy and unexpected things happening around them. I really like this book because it feels like you are right there in a spooky space movie, and it's packed with imagination. This is not an easy book to read, though at least not for me. It looks like a small book, but it's quite dense. Author throws in a lot of science that feels like you're reading a research paper at some point. It feels real serious, and it really makes you think about big stuff, like what makes us human and how much can we really understand about things that the way beyond us. Even though it's an old book, it feels fresh today. The questions it raises about science and our emotions are pretty timeless. If you like stories that are under horror genre but want to get into science fiction, Solaris might just be for you. Okay, now this is a relatively newer read because most of other books are the list I have read many years ago, but I still can't believe I have only picked up Rendezvous with Rama last year. I am a huge fan of Arthur C. Clarke. Childhood's End wrecked me, but Rama, it's different. It's about a massive cylinder object enters our solar system. We call it Rama. A team is sent to explore it. That's it. No aliens, no wars, just discovery. Clark's writing is so calm and beautiful. He doesn't force drama. He lets the mystery breathe. You are right there with the crew, floating through these enormous empty chambers, finding strange gardens and machines that have no clear purpose. It's not about answers, it's about the wonder of not knowing. And the atmosphere is like stepping into one of those old science fiction magazine covers. You can see Rama in your head. Many movies and shows got inspired from this book. You can tell it just stands test of time. I absolutely recommend this book to anyone. It's my new favorite book, hands down. Last but not least, we have The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. This book is hard to describe. The story goes like meteor shower blinds most of the world and suddenly society collapses. But there's another layer. A giant plant called triffids start moving, hunting, and now with everyone vulnerable, they're free to take over the world. I love Wyndham's work because he's just terrifying. This isn't a shoot them up survival story. It's about ordinary people trying to navigate a world that's crumbling in slow motion. The horror isn't just the triffids, it's the realization that everything we rely on, electricity, order, trust, can vanish overnight. What makes this book special though is the atmosphere. Wyndham writes like he's sitting across you at the kitchen table just telling you a story he's not sure you'll believe. This book's got this vintage mid-century vibe, like black and white horror movies, but it's not dated. It's cozy in its eeriness, if that makes sense. I'm usually not that big fan of apocalypse books. I love watching post-apocalypse movies and books somehow. This one though has its slow creeping tensions, seems stick with me forever. It's not about hero survivals in the world, it's about flawed people making terrible, relatable choices. If you ever lay awake wondering how fragile our world really is, this book will linger in your mind. It's unsettling, but in a way that feels honest. An honorable mention, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream by Harlan Ellison. This one is complicated. I love short stories, so I figured I want to include at least one short story collection here. This one is a classic for a reason. It's brutal, but not just for shock value. Allison's imagination here is insane. The title story is about after a war, an artificial intelligence called AM, the last Martian left on Earth, wiped out nearly the whole humanity except for 5 people. But AM doesn't kill them. Instead, it tortures them forever. No escape, no hope, just endless suffering. The story feels like being trapped in a nightmare you cannot wake up from. The atmosphere is haunting like a shadow you cannot shake. It's a master class in post-apocalypse horror. I had it in honorable mention as cause Harlan Ellison himself. It's problematic. His work is undeniably influential, but there's a lot to unpack. A lot of his stories either barely include female characters or reduce them to just stereotypes, the female victims. Then there's the obsession with sexual violence popped up in his stories a lot. Sometimes it's framed as horror or social commentary, but too often it feels like just a shock value. I admitted his story did impact me and memorable, but also wanted to point out the author's flaws matter. Anyway, I don't recommend him without a content warning, but if you can sit with that tension, it's worth reading. So there you have it, my top 10 favorite classic science fiction novels. Each of these books is special in its own way, and they've all left a lasting impression on me. Let me know in the comments which ones you've read and what your favorites are. And as always, love your recommendations. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.